Well, hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of Harebrained Games. Today we're going to take a look at a game called Atlantic Chase. This is the Kriegsmarine against the Home Fleet, 1939 to 1942. It is listed as Volume 1 in what is called the Intercept series. Hopefully a brand new series coming down the pike from GMT Games. It's designed by Jeremy White, who many of you may know from the Doolittle Raid, one of my classic all-time favorites. Enemy Coast Ahead, the Dam Busters, and his Skies Over the Reich, Skies Over the Insert Your Country Here game. So without further ado, let's take a look. Okay, let's take a look at what comes in Atlantic Chase. Without further ado, I present to you the board. This board is epic in size. Well, not terribly epic, but it's still nice and sizable. It covers the Atlantic Ocean in great detail. It has lots of places for looking up information right at your fingertips, as well as various tracks, information, battle board. A lot of the things that you're going to do are going to be very specific and be able to just simply occur on the map without any side notes, side piles, side decks, etc. We have set up for you the first mission we're going to run through, which is the first solo scenario mission. Every player, by every player I mean one or two, is going to be able to get their own mat. This mat will give them all the details they need to be able to properly deploy and prepare their troops being fleets or convoys or you name it, for battle. You get not one, not two, not three, but 4 dice in 2 different shades of color. One is blue and one is not blue. You have a set of cheat sheets, which you are going to find utterly invaluable. They're well written, well picturized, we'll put it that way, and they have all the information you need to be able to quickly play the game once you understand it. You have tons and tons of ships, ship tokens, ship counters. These are for Germans and the British and the French, even a couple Americans in there, and a lot of different helper tokens, intel markers, contact markers, things you're going to need during the course of play, as well as damage tokens. And you have, and I placed these in my own special organization. I tried them in the sheets, but my fingers are too big and thick and hefty, and so I was having trouble getting them out of the... So these little cups are nice because you just bring out the ones you're going to use and you use them, and they work great. But you have different fleets are going to have different... These are called trajectory markers, and they have station markers. Those are the 2 things you're going to need to be aware of. Station markers are the cylindrical markers there. They're noted with different lines. 1 line, no lines, 1 line, 2 line, 3 lines. Same thing, 1, 2, 3, and then 1 time, 2 line, 3 line, B line. No, that would be these. And that's what you get in the... Oh, but wait, there's more. You also get a tutorial, which is a 50-plus page tutorial fraught with details and charts and examples, etc. You get the actual rule book, which is itself another 50-plus page exercise in detail, in charts and sheets and maps and pictures galore. Not enough, you say? Well, you've got the 2-player scenarios, and these will take you on all kinds of journeys with you and a friend, as well as information about the campaign game that's available. And you get the solitaire scenarios, which is yet another full-featured set of missions to be able to play you against a solitary player, imaginary player of sorts as well. But wait, there's more, and it's not sold in any store at the moment. And that is advanced rules. If it's not enough, if you feel like you just aren't having your detail-oriented nature satiated, we have advanced battle rules, which brings the battle into a much more detailed manner of play. Snafu check. You've got the campaign charts in case you're playing the campaign. You've got your advanced battle rules. And there's an inset map for certain scenarios where you're really drilling down into one section of the Atlantic, double-sided, or the Norwegian Sea, and there you go. And finally, not to be outdone by all the others, we have the errata, which shipped with the box. And note that it's in a waterproof container, so if anything happens to the main box, you'll at least know what they didn't get right. Anyway, that's what's in it. Let's get to an example of play. Okay, So before we begin, I'm going to run through one of the most important fundamental concepts of Atlantic Chase. Now, there's a lot of stuff that you can do in this game and a lot of variety to the missions. It's not a one-stop shop. There's not a particular single vein of how the game plays out because every mission and scenario is different. But the one thing that you'll always need to know is about stations and trajectories. In Atlantic Chase, your task forces, and you could have a lot of them on the board, you could have very few on the board, they're all going to be comprised or represented at any given time by one of two things. Either a station or a trajectory. A station is a single area on the map that your task force is somewhere near. This is probably the most precise information you're going to get about where your task force is, or where your opponent's task force is. However, when it's time for them to move, relocate, or make decisions that involve leaving those shores, they become trajectories. Trajectories are, well, these are the Catan pieces, aren't they, that you'll see here. Once a station becomes a trajectory, you have no more information about where it actually is than your opponent does. Enemy, ally alike. Nobody knows really where it's at. These blocks, these stations, trajectories, you need to pull back according to the designer and think of them as information, not pathways. There's no direction, there's no confidence that you can find your ship going from here to here to here. They literally just tell you the general idea of a ship and where it could be. When you understand that, a lot of other stuff clicks into place. Now, at the beginning of the game, this particular session, we're going to play Raiders of the North Atlantic, and I'm going to give you just a simple sample of how it goes. There are so many good resources for playthroughs that are so exhaustive and professional that I'm going to simply link to two of my favorites in the YouTube comments or description, because they're going to do a way better job of really getting into it. If you like the idea of what you see when I explain it to you, then please watch those videos and you'll get an even greater depth of understanding of what all is involved when you play a game of Atlantic Chase. So in this case, this is what we're doing. It's September 1939. Grand Admiral Raider intends to interfere with British merchants. So that's you, but being the spoiler. Before war was declared, ships were sent to the North Sea to take up position, and now he's ordered raiders to slip through the blockade and harass Britain's supply lines. Our objective is to score hits on British convoys. Under no circumstances are we to lose a German vessel. That will lose us lots of victory points. Your ships may complete in these two locations. Rendezvous may change your objective. So we've done the setup, weather, initiative. Let's go over weather and initiative. Weather is very important here. How far you get to travel at the end of your turn when you do what's called what do they call it? Time lapse. That's it. When you do a time lapse, like brain fart for a second, how the distance you get to go is usually going to be measured by how well your ship is at going faster than slower. However, in bad weather becomes like roulette. Like, you do not know what will happen. You might travel a short distance, you might travel a long distance. That's one of the great inputs into your turn, and one of the great game changers that makes every scenario, even the same one being replayed, quite different. The other thing are your initiative. Initiative is hugely important here. And initiative is the momentum. It's the momentum that you have to be able to string together a series of actions. You don't have discrete turns here. You don't go, I do my 3 steps, you do your 3 steps. You have initiative. This is not the first game to do it, but it's definitely one that's embraced it fully. On your turn, you will do things. You will have opportunities to lose or gain initiative. Some are greater opportunities than others. When that happens, you get to take over and start doing your own thing until you lose the initiative, in which case your opponent's going to take over and start stringing together their series of actions. Every time you don't get the initiative when you could, you raise your tally initiative marker up higher and higher, so that the odds of you getting the initiative get greater and greater the more you don't actually get it. So, without further ado, let's begin. Germans start first, and we have at our disposal 2 task forces with ships that we can use to harass and whatever. Waiting in the wings is the Grafspee, and that one is available if you do a reinforcement action. You can see all the actions you're capable of doing. A lot of these actions are they're detailed but not difficult to enact. And many of the times, the choices you make are going to be ones where you can take a subset of a couple and not have to worry about the rest. But let's begin with the most obvious one, and that is trajectory. Trajectory is a free action. You can do it generally without having to worry about giving up the initiative. But at the same time, you got to do it wisely. So a station becomes a trajectory, or a trajectory becomes a station based on some things. Like right now, this is where we're at. We have this ship and this task force. What we're trying to do is take this convoy. You'll see that these two beige markers are convoys. Our job, of course, is to try to mess with them. So let's do that. So we're going to remove this station and put it back here. We're going to take the trajectory pieces and we're going to build ourselves a trajectory. It's very free form. You're definitely not going to be worried about being constrained too much, but you're going to find out that there are certain things to keep in mind when you create trajectories. Trajectories can be as long as you want. You could go, hey, you know what, I'm going to go here, 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 and then even just, there. Why would you do that? Yeah, I don't know. It's fun. Anyway, so in this case, we're trying to intercept or interact with the convoy somewhere. We get to pick where. That's the beautiful thing. Nobody knows where this convoy is, so we're going to pick a point along the trajectory, and we're going to say, yes, I want you to manifest here. Like, it's interesting that the enemy can literally try and coerce the actual location of your ship, and to do so simply by crossing the streams here. So what happens? We've done a trajectory action, and this is going to be very important. You'll see at the bottom here, the trajectory action. You can extend it. You can't shrink it. That's done by a different pattern, but you can extend it, or you can create a new one by removing a task force, etc. So that's where you go. Now what do you do? Well, since you didn't lose the initiative, you don't even have to roll for initiative. Now we can do something else, and we're going to do what's called a naval search. When you don't know where the enemy is, you do a naval search. A naval search is interesting because it says, I think you're here, now let's find out if I'm right. And when it comes down to that, we do this, we have the active task force. These are some nice little helpers. I know some people aren't thrilled with them, but I certainly am. This is your active task force. Like, this is who's actually going to make that check. This is going to be the target of your naval search. And then we're going to go ahead and calculate trajectory. Now, what does that mean? That means that you have to add up all the trajectories for several things. And it gets complicated, but it's really not once you understand here. Like in this sheet kind of tells you, like the active player, you add up how long your trajectory is to come up with a base number. And then you add in any additional notes for other things. What's an example to explain? So you've got your contributing task force, and you've got airstrikes that can also contribute. Again, that gets a little complicated, but suffice to say, you're always going to have your active task force, and you're always going to have your the target task force that you're going to go after. From there, you can add, if there were other ships around and they were intersecting, you could add them as well to say, hey, join in on this. That has benefits and drawbacks, but you can do that. Also, if you're near an air force, near your own air base, or you have a task force that happens to have a carrier, none of mine do, then you can also designate those as well to add to. But here's the thing, the longer the trajectory, the less precise and the less awesome the results are likely to be. In this case, we're going to do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. This is a very simple one. The trajectory is 11 for this naval search. What does that mean? It means we're right in this here. Okay, so now we've got that figured out. Let's just go ahead and put that there just to kind of note that we're at 11. Okay. Now that we're at 11, we need to go, okay, well, we've got this. Now we need to figure out this. We take 2 of our dice, and Germans are blue, and we're going to get ready. We do need to apply common modifiers. So every time you check, you go, is there air support around that we can tap into? Ooh, yes, there is. 1, 2, there is air support. And so the enemy, yep, I think that's valid. Enemy can do air support, but 2 away, if you're the target, is 0, so there's no point in that. Contact marker, if somehow we were able to make contact earlier, that's going to add a big bonus to the active player finding and narrowing down your position. And then there's a couple others, again, coordination and such. In this case, we're just going to roll our d6s, and it's 6. 6 is the result. So we're here, we go to here, and this means that we have split. We've arrived early or late is what they call it. This is kind of cool. It doesn't let us have an exact location like this one does, but it does let us split it up and go, okay, so I'm going to remove this. We can't have a trajectory that doesn't have contiguity, whatever that means. We'll move these for now. We've already done the job. And we're going to say, okay, now, either everything to one side or everything to the other goes away. I want these to go away. I don't want this convoy to get close, because if this convoy gets close and is able to do what's called a completion action, they can get here and they successfully have the convoy arrive, and then the British get victory points. I don't. I really want to capture these so that I get victory points. So there we go. Now we've got this. We've done the naval strike. It actually serves some purpose. I like that. Thank you, Naval Search. Then anything that's not the target gets to do a time lapse. Yay! So not only that, but I need to I can actually constrict. Now look at my medium size. Okay, so I'm at medium. A medium speed ship can remove 3 segments. That's awesome. What does that mean? 1, 2, 3. We've now removed these 3 segments, and we've basically said, here we are. This is our station. Woohoo! All right, so, and removing those is important, because once you lay out a trajectory, you're stuck with that trajectory until you get to be a station. Then you've got some more flexibility. So there we are, and that's what we do. And then you'll notice in Naval Search it has SI right here. That means that means the British are going to try to seize initiative, and they're going to roll their dice. If it's 9 or better, and it's not, then they get, if it was, they'd get to say, okay, I take the initiative, now it's my turn. Instead, it's a 4. It's lousy. But the tally goes up 1, and that means that they can add this to future rolls and keep going until they finally get initiative again. All right, so we get to keep the initiative. So what can we do now? Well, we're still not in a situation where we can do a lot. So you know what? I'm gonna do some silly moves to show you what happens. I'm gonna do a trajectory here to try to go from here to here to find so that I can engage this ship. So what would I do? I would remove this, and I would add pieces here and here, and I'm gonna be silly and put one here and then one here. That's bad. You know why? Because that means we have to add intel markers. Intel markers are the bane. They are the thing you do not want. So there's an intel marker there. There we go. And elsewhere. What's bad about an intel marker is that it totally messes with your plans a lot of the time. You can't shorten your trajectory unless you have to deal with this intel marker. It kind of sticks in your craw here. Whereas when you do a time lapse and you're like, oh, I can get rid of these two, whatever, you have to go to the intel limit and remove intel in a different way, and it's more limiting in what you can remove. Also, if you have an intel marker and you go do anything, almost always there's some penalty, and you'll see it here, where if you have an intel marker, your enemy can interrupt and try and mess with you. That wouldn't happen if you didn't have an intel marker. So these intel markers are sort of valuable information that persists. It tells the enemy kind of where you are, where you're going, what you're doing, without it being too concrete. So, what would we do with that? Well, we'd try and get rid of it. The other thing it does, and this is nasty, is it gives you a signals. And signals, unlike Naval Search, where you don't know exactly the result, signals is all about, you have an intel marker and it's my turn. Hey, cool. Now you're a station. Like, it really messes with you up. So intel is good on your enemies, bad on your opponents. And that's the essence of kind of the main core stuff to begin with in the scenario. Again, like, so many things happen in the single player game, and I printed these sheets out for simplicity. When it's time for your enemy's turn as a solo player, they're going to roll, and based on what happens here, they could do airstrikes, they could add more convoys, they could do try and do completion actions, because as a convoy, if I was able to do a completion action, which is one, if I'm 6 spaces or less away from my target, I can try and just basically go for the throat, go for the win, sprint to the finish. I can't do that right now because it's too long. But if I had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, these suckers, if I don't get, my enemy has one chance to try and mess with it and seize initiative. But if not, then that convoy is done and they get victory points. And so you got to be careful. You don't just get to rest on your laurels and quietly go after stuff. Hardly ever. Airstrikes are another big thing. And if you're noticing here, there's a lot of air bases. Also, again, you could have task forces that have carriers. They become conduits of airstrikes as well. Airstrikes can be brutal, because if they're within 1 or 2, they can, and you call an airstrike, you can designate them out to any particular place, and it doesn't, like, you got some nasty times if the airstrikes, if you're not careful. And the airstrike, if you'll notice here, has some particularly woeful damage, so something to think about. But, and then again, airstrikes only work when the weather's good. If the weather's not good, A, you roll a dice and you have no idea how far you'll go, and B, you don't have to worry about airstrikes, so use that to your advantage. Finally, there's other actions like stealth and other things, but generally speaking, everything flows as far as the context of whatever mission you're doing. In this particular place, I have played this mission so many times, and every time it's like a different adventure. Something different happens. Even if you take the same path and try and do the same thing, there are variables in your opponent's moves that could change. I mean, it could even change the high level objectives. And then one thing we didn't go is engage. If you have a situation where you have both of your stations in the same spot, you can engage. Engaging basically says, hey, you got units, I got units. Let's take it to the mattresses. So, say for example, you have here, say you have these cruisers here, and you're going to go through a round of combat, 1, 2, 3, or 4, usually 3, and you're going to fight, and there's smoke that's involved here where you can lay down smoke. There's your intrinsic value, like accuracy versus distance accuracy, how fast your target's going. All of these play a part into what you roll and how it goes and what hits you take. If you take a hit, there you go, you're damaged. Take another hit, you're gone. Victory points for one or the other, etc. There's ways to kind of break away and go, I don't like this, I'm heading out of here. There's a lot of, even without the advanced combat rules, there's a lot of subtlety and kind of intrigue in playing this out. Not a ton, because you're still kind of at the same time going, like, dealing with the fact that you're working with the overall picture of trying to complete the objectives laid out before you. So that's it. That's kind of a basic essence of Atlantic Chase. Again, I'm going to be sending the links on the video or under the video or wherever to show you some of the, like, just stellar, organized, logical, coherent playthroughs that will get you all the way through the tutorials and into the first mission. So there's 2 particular that were invaluable to me. Anyway, so that's it. Let's get to my final thoughts on Atlantic Chase. Okay, Atlantic Chase. Final thoughts on Atlantic Chase. So, before we get into the cons and the pros, I wanted to kind of touch base on the reality of what this game does offer, afford, and caveat for you. As I was learning it, this game arrived on, I was one of the first to get a copy from the P500 way back in, I believe, early March or late March of 2021. And I literally had this game set up 4 or 5 times in the past year and a half. I have read through the manual on the bus, I have read through the rulebooks, tutorials, and stuff. This was one of the trickier games for me to get my head around. Now, that's not a ding on the game, that's a reality that if you're used to certain conventions, not ones you attend, ones you that wrap around your games, then you're going to find a very unusual situation here. And this is not surprising for me. I've had many games that I set up, looked at, went, yeah, this is overkill for my brain right now, set them aside, and then come back to them about, usually, a few months later. In this case, it was about a year later. I never for one second demerited the game for this, because it's just the nature of how I learn. Something so radically new, I just had difficulty getting my head around. Usually at some point I'll get an aha moment, like with Labyrinth, War on Terror, and there's Lord of the Rings card game. There are other ones that just like I can read some manuals that are really complicated. I really didn't have a problem with Fields of Fire, but for some reason this one was difficult conceptually. Not because of anything within the game itself, because just conceptually it was tricky. And I want to go over the 3 things that may help you, 3 things that I had to learn to mentally absorb so that I could really get that aha moment, and then everything falls into place after that. The big one was obviously the trajectories. And that took a bit to understand, because if you're geared, or I was geared always, you see a unit, it's in a hex, it's there. There it is. If there's smoke, well, you have a smoke token. If there's fog, you have a fog token. It's there, but it's hidden in fog. This is, everything's geared towards space and presence being one in war games. My chit is there, therefore it is. The idea of having presence but not direction nor chronological coherence did trip me up. It almost feels like maybe I should swap out the wooden tracks for wood-colored cotton balls sometimes to go, hey, it's murky, don't forget, doofus. It is designed, Jeremy White, he made clear, this is kind of an info war being waged, and that's a little bit hard for me to grasp, particularly when meshed with other unfamiliar terms and concepts that I had to learn to kind of understand. The designer reiterates this a lot in the many tomes of knowledge that he writes down for us, and that it's info, and that the game is about nobody really knowing where much of anything for certain until the final conclusion, and that's both the beauty and the learning point from it. The other thing is to realize is that the enemy has as much agency in determining where your fleet actually is when it's in a trajectory path than you do. You're used to guessing where on the track could the ship be, how far along is it, not where on this track will I coerce the ship to be, or my enemies coerce the ship to be. The opponent can dictate the location of where your fleet is while you're hoping to time-lapse it ASAP. And that's an odd thing that takes a little bit of a hurdle to jump over. I choose for you to be there. Like, okay. And the other thing is just, once you get into it and you get past that, it's that fact that the trajectory length as it relates to battle and the probabilities on the different charts, it's simple enough on the most simple case, but once you start adding contributing air and task forces, you can go through the rules and do it, but then you realize you're adding a modifier on one axis, but you're also adding a negative modifier on the other axis. Why would I do this kind of thing? And then you realize it's about the trade-offs. You realize that, yes, you could have a contribution. They might not help you on one side of the chart. They might help you a little bit on the other side of the chart. But then they get to do action. They get to make momentum and time lapse themselves. And so you see that the trade-offs finally do. And once all 3 of these things are understood, then all the other pockets of I know how this works, I just don't know how this all works, clicks. And I had that light bulb moment, a few months ago, and that's when the cat and mouse game begins. And what a Tom and Jerry rigged, super happy, fun, frolic time it actually winds up being. But first, the cons. Okay, so as rolling into it, the first thing is that this is going to be a pretty esoteric first impression for people who just are. But hey, if you're not a wargamer, this is not the best first game for you. In that regard, I don't think, unless you're really determined and motivated, and also if you're used to the standard conventional ways the games go, this is going to blow your mind. Thankfully, in a good way. Teaching is going to be tricky because everyone, like, as I was teaching it to people, there were people who just fell off the train too. Okay, now let's play maneuver, or gin rummy. That was one of my older friends. And anyway, it really needs that aha moment. If you have that aha moment, then you're fine. If you are smarter than me, you're going to be fine. That's most of you. Because the thing is, there's a free form. Even once you're past all of that and you get all of that understood, the trajectories, the, convoy, all the things you do, the naval search, the signals, the passing, when to do that, all that stuff, you're still going to have, you're still going to have the freeform nature of the choices, particularly trajectory. It's jarring at first, particularly when you don't know what advantage or disadvantages lie within. It's hard because you're staring at this game going like you would stare at Picasso. You're like, it's brilliant, but I don't know why. And you've got this freedom, or worse, like my teacher once said, that for some people, the worst thing you can give them is a blank slate, a blank chalkboard, a blank whiteboard. For others, it's a gift of a lifetime. So my personality wants at least some sort of three dots on the whiteboard somehow. So for me, that was the tricky part. The tutorial is visually and expressively a labor of love at the highest order. It encourages patience, though, to slowly open your eyes to this whole new world of Atlantic Chase in this Intercept series. But for all its theoretical greatness and its tangible greatness, it does falter a little bit for the impatient who are like, I just want to know how to play. And then that's gonna, that hurry rush thing can be a little bit it can make the tutorial less effective than it wound up being for me when I finally broke down, sat down, knocked off the antsiness, and went through it. And piecing it all together with the contextual why, the manuals and the information, you learned islands of information. You've got islands of great information, but you don't necessarily have the ferry route and schedule to be able to know how to navigate it all into a coherent understanding of the game at the higher level. And that's okay, because you will learn it if you're like me. The other thing is, and other things, it can appear overwhelming. Even if you're just like, I haven't even started the game yet. It can, by sheer force of papyrus volume, it can be overwhelming. That's just the reality. I mean, like, oh, look at all I've got. I look at it and go, wow, this is a ton of content, man. This is awesome. And other people are like, so it's okay. And the narrative does require sometimes your stretching of the boundaries of explanation. One of the examples being, and this was on, I think, Board Game Geek, but I've run this too, where you can set a long trajectory. You can have an airstrike over on one side, but then later on your turn, someone does a naval search on the completely other side of the trajectory, and that's where you are, and you're like, oh, wait, it was like, and then there's some storytelling things like, well, maybe he started in the direction you didn't think he did, whatever. You just have to go with the flow, and you'll be fine. Now, the one thing from a component standpoint is that there's lines on each of those little wooden fence posts, and that's great if they're all lined up and facing up. If you're jockeying and moving around, though, they flop out. You're like, is this the blank one or is this the not blank one? It would probably be better either to not have a blank one, but then all the sides would be blank anyway. So I ended up just taking a pin. I know, purists are gonna cringe, and just all four sides of it, because I'm always the guy that like looks and rotates it just the wrong way to have to rotate it the entire way to go, oh, this is the one with the two ticks. So not a big deal. I fixed the problem. It's okay. Not I have good storage management for this game. I learned to get some bins and containers and trays, and store things pretty well. Although I'm generally not thrilled when I see double-sided counters. I really kind of wish every unit had its own counter, because it's so much easier to be able to go through and find them. That's the other thing, I guess. But again, we're not talking Fields of Fire here. We're not talking hundreds of unique individual units. So it's again, not a big deal. There's some errors in a few places as far as like wording and a few things here and there. And the errata by now has long since been addressed. And I got to be honest with you, in a game of this magnitude, with this much being described that's really orthogonal to normal gameplay, and all of the just in-depth and intricate amount of examples and charts and flow, it's impressive there weren't even more. I mean, no matter how deliberate, yeah, no matter how much you try, stuff's going to come through with that magnitude, and I forgive it wholeheartedly because like the errata is just awesome. If you read it, you'll find mistakes in the errata too, which is funny. But also, you just find they just take it like, yeah, missed that one. I love that attitude. Like, yeah, okay, the game's still great. So, and no matter how deliberate you are at trying to run turns, there were a few things, little procedures like the weather check, every initiative change, the initiative modifier, every loss. Those got a little bit. I can't count the amount of times I forgot those or had to remind myself or had to go back and go, okay, wait, what did I? So that's something just to keep in mind of. It's not a negative for the game. It's mostly just like I don't know how to find a better way to do that tracking, but just keep in mind that while the game flow is really cool, there are some things that you just kind of want to like, okay, don't forget this every single time. So, and the actions you do are really well defined, but you do have to catch the subtle differences. Use that chart that says, hey, if you're going to do this action, you're going to vie for initiative. If you're going to do this one, you're going to try and seize initiative. I don't have to have a station here. I just have to have a trajectory here to do this and stuff. And if you're not certain of the concepts, like of the terms, like again, signals did not make sense to me until it was described. Naval search made sense and stuff. Pass, time lapse, all those things. They're going to be a little tricky to kind of conceptualize until it clicks. Now that's enough. That's enough of the cons, and honestly, they're not that many. But for the pros, let's go over them. This is my favorite part. Let's go over the things I like about the game. Jeremy White's, if you know anything about Jeremy White's previous entries, he's all about the story. And for him, narrative is normative. And this is no different in a different way. Now, his previous ones have been much more, in my mind, procedural in sort of a movie director kind of way, where you have some leeway with how the story goes, but in general, you're going to flow, towards the dam in Dam Busters. You're going to flow towards Tokyo in the Doolittle raid. This is a whole different level of orthogonal gameplay to anything I've ever seen. This is the sweetest and most foreign refrain of unusual concepts. This is the Willy Wonka of World War II surface fleet wargaming. It really is. Once you give up your misgivings or your systemic predictive patterning of what other games do, you are in for a really fun ride. The whole nature of the game is, it culminates in these nuanced, teeth-on-edge, stressful, true-to-the-spirit surface combat situations. There's the combat itself, the battle game, even in its simplest part, is juicy. It's kind of a sub-game all its own, especially when you do add in the advanced mechanics. You've got your distance, you've got jockeying your ships into position based on what their strengths and weaknesses for. You've got the combat, you've got the exiting battle, can you pull it off? All of it is quickly but cleverly crafted around the battle board built onto the main board. Thank you for not having like 5 other places to do it. The space, yes, thank you. And the game it's not only unique without, in that the whole construction is unique, it's also unique within. You're not going to find to the sameness with the scenarios. In my mind, you're not. It spawns a great deal of creativity in its gameplay, all within the confines of this wild and crazy new system. No two particular matches were alike for me, even playing the same templated mission. Like, I've heard the complaint that it's a solvable puzzle, that you kind of already always know what to do. I don't know that I agree with that, particularly solo, because of how different they've been. That concept that it's same was really foreign to me, because literally in the first solo mission, I played it 8 times, and they were pretty relatively radically different situations arising each time, even with my similar inputs, because of the way that the British might react in ways I don't expect, sometimes to my advantage, sometimes far less to my advantage. And the game board is just masterful. Just looking at it, it's all the right information right at the tip of your hands, or tip of your elbows. The information is presented in a way that melds deftly with the map style in a pleasant and harmonious manner, to be honest with you. It just all fits and works, something that Jeremy White's designs have generally done in the past. I'm a huge fan of game boards having all of the sort of like when you have a game board and you have like if the game board itself can have, here's the place you put this deck of cards, that deck of cards, these units, that units, you kind of won me over halfway already. I really like that. This goes one better again by just having the sheets, the charts, the maps, the graphs, the battle board, the map itself, all that stuff on the board, and that's magnifique. Now let's talk about the manual. The manual is second to one in its all-consuming marriage of information and presentation of the topic. It is a very, very well done set of materials. Now I know that there's some people that take the page count again as a detriment. I think that's a mistake because you're not dealing with thick, deep, dense, rule sets that are so thick and mighty that by page 4 you feel like you've read, the Fellowship of the Ring. This is not. This is intentionally done in a way that with a lot of white space, there's a lot of there's a lot of white space, there's a lot of pictures, there's a lot of reiteration of concepts. This is the closest thing to a paper-based website I've ever seen. You've got cross-linking and indexing everywhere. If it refers to a term, there's where you go look it up if you forgot. Again, not just in certain parts of the map, on the board, in the sheets, in the rules, in the manuals, the tutorials, everything is indexed and indexed gloriously. I mean, everything is the glossy gold. The player aids themselves are glossy gold mines of just the right info and just the right balance to be able to help you remember all the things you need to do. So don't let the size of it fool you. It is not. It is. Like, I think the only manual I've ever been more impressed with was the one for High Frontier for All, which, again, both of these take really complicated, really different concepts and made the onboarding as smooth as I could possibly imagine or ask for. It's just, the manual reads more like a Red Robin dessert menu than a legal briefing, and that's a good thing, both for the general vibe of pleasantly bringing you instructions on a tray, and for its precise manner of visually and literarily teaching you almost lovingly, like a kindergarten teacher rather than the high school physics teacher I had. And again, I like the wood pieces. I think they're fair representations of information and location. The ship cardboard tokens they're unique, they're informational, and they present the information well. They do the job. I'd like to think of ways to bling them someday, and bling them home to mom, but I don't know anyway. And I love that the fact that, the errata, speaking back to the errata, I love that they own it. They own it. They're like, yeah, mistakes happen. It's still a great game. Like, I paid $60 for this game. I've got 60 hours into it already. What does that tell you about the return on investment? I mean, I couldn't have gone to the movies, 10 times and done that. So, I mean, there's a better ROI on this than any of those war game coupon book fundraisers they sell at Christmas. So, anyway, and the quantity of content alone here is absolutely staggering. You have competitive scenarios, you have solo scenarios, you've got a full campaign, and all of these are full-fledged game experiences on their own. Let alone the advanced battle rules. If you want more intricate fleet-to-fleet combat, nitty-gritty boom time. Again, first solo encounter I played over 8 times. I could easily keep playing that one and feel like I could find ways to eke out more out of it, but I'm moving on because there's too much good content. And the game will open up its goodies over time. And you either lamenting or laughing at your prior preconceptions. Example, like, hey, I'm going to lay down really long trajectories. Toot toot. Haha, try to find me now. And like, oh wait, I'm stuck going somewhere for a long time. So, and then the flow. The game flow is I like the unshackled nature of the game flow. It's this weaving of staccato and legato where you're just like, you're monopolizing the initiative and then seeing your advantage seep away as the opponent just like grabs the initiative from you, and then the opposite, like, just when the tide of battle is about to crush you, fate plays a game of Twister with your emotions, and you end up disfigured and back spasmic but alive to battle again. So, the ship-to-ship games tend to be long. When you play, like, the games like Surface Fleet, most games tend to be long affairs. Often you have this excitement is really not as much there as it's just a long dose of empty followed by excitement affairs and then back to long. This is not the game. Everything here is hinged on initiative. It's on success or failure. It's on the choices you make or break. I didn't feel like any turn was a dead end. They might have been short and sweet, but they're not a dead end, and no turn is certain in its order or impact or what you can chain together. And so, yeah, that's kind of the culmination of it. So I'm in my final thoughts here, and in my final thoughts, I was going to say that I think I'm 26 years now into video game development, and I know my strengths and limits pretty well by now. I can say that I'm an ideaer, not a designer. There's a big difference. Ideaers all come up with really cool designs in their mind, and they map them out, and they draw them out, and they scheme them out. Designers do all the hard work that take that and then spend years, sometimes decades, making a game actually, fight through all of the things that your ideas didn't cover and stuff. And so I have great respect for designers. And the one thing I ask myself whenever I kind of whenever these games come out, is like, could I have come up with this game as someone who's chock full of ideas but not necessarily got the chops for being a full-on designer? Could I have come up with this game? No, I never could have in a million years come up with this idea. And if I know that if I know that an idea that just tickled me is something I could never have come up with, well, yeah, I mean, yes, if I could have come up with a game, then I know it's probably anywhere from a good to a decent to a bad game. If I couldn't come up with that idea, then I know I'm being given a golden portion of time and opportunity in the universe to experience something great. And that's how I feel like this is. Nothing like anything I played before compares to what this game does and how it handles it. It's otherworldly in its ability to present murky information without cumbersome tracking or hidden aids or erasable markers and whatever. And I don't feel so bad about how much of a personal learning curve I had compared to others to overcome, because I mean the designer literally talks about the decades of iteration, concept exploring, thoughts and prayers, likely additions, tweaks, ad nauseum, to come up with his best hidden info game to date. So while I do believe that the Doolittle Raid remains his greatest story reenactment war game, this is definitely his and arguably even the greatest story generation war game experience I've had yet to date. I don't like to throw the term masterpiece around anymore because I used to use it like candy, but I'm going to have to break my rule this time and say that this is a masterpiece, a magnus opus in design and ingenuity, and I highly recommend it whenever it gets back in stock for people. Atlantic Chase, Jeremy White, great stuff. All right, thanks again, and we'll see you next time on Harebrained Games.